Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a delicious chocolate hazelnut biscotti. So first, preheat your oven to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 150 degrees Celsius, and you will need a large baking sheet, and you can line it with a piece of parchment paper like I've done here, or you could just lightly butter it or spray it with a nonstick cooking spray. And then the first thing we need to do is to take 4 ounces of your favorite semi-sweet or bittersweet chocolate, or if you want, you could use 2/3 of a cup of chocolate chips, and the chocolate needs to be finely ground. Now you could do this on a cutting board with a sharp knife, but to make things a lot easier, I'm going to use a food processor. So just put the chocolate in there, and then I'm going to add to that 1 cup about 210 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar. And I'm using the sugar with the chocolate because that helps the chocolate get into really tiny pieces and not to make it into a paste. So I'm just going to process this until it's really finely ground. Okay, that looks good. Okay, I'm just going to pour this in here so you can see it. Yeah, it's nicely finely ground with the brown sugar, very nice. But like I said, you could do it on a cutting board. Okay, so now the next thing we need to do is in a large bowl have about 1 3/4 cups, which is 230 grams of white all-purpose flour. And to that, I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup, which is 30 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder. And I'm going to sift that over the top. Now this is the just regular unsweetened cocoa powder, not the Dutch process. So between the semi-sweet chocolate and the cocoa powder, this biscotti is going to have a really deep chocolate flavor. And depending on the type of chocolate you use, the brand of semi-sweet or bittersweet, and the brand of your cocoa powder, that will affect the taste of your biscotti. So just keep that in mind. That if yours tastes different than, say, someone else's, that's probably the difference. And then to that, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of either instant coffee powder or espresso powder. Now, if you don't like coffee, you could just leave that out. And 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And you could either sift this, or I'm just going to whisk it together with a wire whisk here. Just want to make sure everything's all mixed together. Okay, and then if you have an electric stand mixer like I have here, use the paddle attachment, or you could just use an electric hand mixer, or you could even just use a wire whisk in a large bowl. You need 3 large eggs and have those at room temperature, and 1 1/2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. And we're just going to beat this together. So maybe a minute. Whoop. There we go. Okay. And then we're going to add the our finely ground chocolate with the sugar. Now, if you just chopped your chocolate on a cutting board separately from the sugar, then just add your chopped chocolate and your brown sugar here at this point. And I'm just going to beat this in. simple enough there. As you can see, you could easily just do this with a wire whisk. It's not a lot of beating for this recipe. And now I'm going to add my flour mixture. And then when this is, we're going to beat this together to make a dough. And about halfway through, I'm going to add 1 cup, that's 240 milliliters, of chopped toasted hazelnuts. Now, I know some people find hazelnuts hard to find. If that is the case, you could just substitute another nut, like almonds would be very good here. So about halfway through, I'm going to gradually add the nuts. And that's it, as you can see. Pretty easy dough to make. I added the nuts gradually because that way they get evenly distributed throughout the dough. Because what you don't want is all the nuts all clumped together. You want it pretty evenly distributed throughout. Okay. So a biscotti dough is quite sticky, and we are going to roll it into a log shape. So you want to make sure that you flour your counter pretty well. Now, if you wanted this even more chocolatey, you could add some just regular chocolate chips to this along with the nuts. Okay, I'm going to flour my hands here, and a little more on the counter. And then we're going to divide this in half because we're going to make 2 logs. So you use a sharp knife, or I'm using this bench scraper. And now if you have a scale, you could weigh it and be really accurate. I'm going to just eyeball it. Seems about right. If you have one of these bench scrapers, they're really nice because they clean up your counter. So we're going to roll each half into a log about 10 inches long and 2 inches wide. So that's 25 by 5 centimeters. And if you just brush your flour off, if you want, you could just have a ruler handy and you can just measure it if you don't trust your eye. And then just put it on your sheet, and then we'll take the second one, do the same thing. Now biscotti means it's twice baked. The first time we're baking it in a log shape, then we let that cool, and then we slice it into individual cookies, and then we bake it again to draw out all the moisture from the biscotti, which gives it that long keeping quality. So you want to space them 3-4 inches, maybe 10 centimeters apart, and then I just flatten it to about, like I said, 2 inches, 5 centimeter. Try to make sure it's the same thickness and width all the way. And these will spread as they bake. Okay, so into the oven about 35-40 minutes until they're nice and firm to the touch. So our biscotti's now done. As you can see, they're firm to the touch. Now we need to cut these into slices, but right now it's obviously a little too hot to handle the logs. So what we're going to do is leave them in the pan on a wire rack for about 10 to 15 minutes to let them cool, and then we will slice them. So we are now going to slice the biscotti logs. So just pick them up, they're cool enough for us to handle. And then you can use a sharp knife, something like this, or you could use a serrated knife. And I like to, you don't have to do this, but I just like to slice off the ends. Those are for me. And then we're going to cut about 3/4 of an inch, a half to 3/4 of an inch, about 2 centimeter slices on the diagonal. And some people like to do a sawing motion. Some people like to just cut right straight down. So whatever works for you. So. Now these, the logs are fully baked. So when you cut off a slice, you could eat them like this. But what we're doing now is we're going to cut them into slices, put them back on the baking sheet and bake them. And that's going to draw the moisture out of the biscotti, which gives them that real dry and crisp texture and the long keeping qualities. Okay, so just put them all back on the baking sheet, and you can crowd them because they're not going to rise anymore. So there we go. So now we are going to put them back in the oven for about 15 minutes, and that will draw some of the moisture out, and then we're going to flip them over and cook them for another 15 minutes. Okay, so we've baked them for 15 minutes on one side. So now we're just going to flip them over, and then we're going to bake them another 15 minutes on the other side. Now, 15 minutes on each side will give us a nice dry and crisp biscotti that's perfect for dipping in coffee. If you would prefer a little softer biscotti, then I would just bake them about 10 minutes on each side. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so back in the oven for the final 15 minutes. Okay, our biscottis are now done. Don't they look wonderful? I really like how the hazelnuts kind of pop out of the chocolate brown biscotti. Now, we need to let these cool completely. And if you like, you could melt about 3 ounces and about 90 grams of white chocolate and then just dip the ends of the biscotti in the white chocolate if you want even more chocolate flavor. So once they've cooled, you place them in an airtight container, and you could store these for probably up to a month. So until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.